Well, it's an honor to be with you here today. Every one of you teachers are leaders, and you're in what I would call the 5 to 10% of virtuous leaders in the world. That's a very exclusive club, in case you don't know. And leaders are so important to our future. So think about what you're doing. You're forming and teaching what will be 6,200 students this year. And with the buildings under construction, that number will probably quickly grow to about 10,000. This is a very important mission in life. And so my theme is talking about thriving in a chaotic world. Does everybody agree there's a lot of chaos in the world? It didn't come from classic curriculum, did it, Matt? Or Winston? No, not at all. It came from the abandonment of classic curriculum. It's interesting if you think about, you spend all this time teaching students and they learn, why would you abandon really good things, really good tradition? And that abandonment basically leads to chaos. We can observe that. Last week, a immigrant Mexican woman came up to me and said, I trust you with my children. That's a pretty high bar. And when she's speaking for Thales, she's speaking for every one of you teachers. I trust you to protect and educate my children. That's a very high compliment. It's also a very sacred trust. Soren Kierkegaard wrote a white paper where he said, the crowd is untruth. Has everybody seen the recent mobs just spouting untruths? So one of the missions and the prime mission of education is to learn the truth and to seek the truth. And the ballast against chaos in the world are the courageous, virtuous truth seekers, which are in the minority, but thankfully you're in that minority and it's an important place to be. And your role in the world is extraordinarily important, more important than anything you can think about. There was a movie some years ago, some of you may remember, it was called Waiting for Superman. And it essentially was talking about people wanted more private schools because a lot of moms and dads were disappointed. So essentially, each one of you teachers has to be that super person, and your students have to be those super persons. Because Superman doesn't exist, as we know. It's somebody out of the movies. So this idea of relentless truth-seeking leads to wisdom. If I look at my company, Captivere, in the early days, we got a lot of things wrong. We didn't know much. But as we progressed and we sought the truth, essentially the company runs on the truth. It runs on good engineering theory, good management theories, good economics, good philosophy. All that, you're in the early and mid stages of students learning these things. One thing that keeps us as a truth seeker is curiosity. So I would always encourage curiosity. Sometimes we think of young children as being too curious, but it's very, very important. The traditional American work ethic, which sometimes is under stress these days, has really made America. The ability to debate, to research, to communicate. We have now Dr. Josh Herring, our debate coach, needs to be highly encouraged because we can have good ideas, but if we can't communicate them, they're not going to go anywhere. They're going to go to ground. And this idea of virtuous leadership, does anybody hear that in the marketplace very much, virtuous leaders? I don't hear it very often. You'll hear it quite often at Thales. And hopefully our students will understand that. Adam Grant said that the most common way to success is motivation, ability, opportunity, hard work, talent, and he says luck. I would say, the grace of God. But I would add to that perseverance. Because many people go along in life and at some point in time they lose their perseverance and they don't achieve their goals. So we have to, there's obstacles in life that are continuous. Our friend Adrian Bijan, who spoke earlier this year at Thales Academy, said resistance is overcome with energy. So we always have to have enough energy to overcome the resistance. And we will all be resisted all the time for many, many reasons. And as students learn to overcome that resistance, they become more powerful in their intellectual capabilities, in their moral, their character capabilities. So it's very important that we model that behavior for them because they pay attention to every fine detail of what we do. We can't fool them about a single thing. It's amazing how observant they are. Today, young people are very vulnerable because of society, whether it's wokeness or man-made climate change, gender theory, CRT, revisionist history, or progressivism. If you go all the way back to 1900, when the progressive movement began, I can't think of a single thing they got right. One of the things that began with was the income taxes. Anybody like income taxes? I don't. Some people think they're necessary, but prior to 1913, they were not necessary. Kind of interesting to think about, right? I would encourage you to start the year strong. Mrs. Heather Brain was telling me how excited she was to start the new year. And if we can get students to understand, if you begin strong, stay with the program of dress code, good behavior, healthy living, and practice human dignity. Human dignity, it covers the whole span. If we respect each other, we treat each other with kindness. We used to have a teacher here that at the bottom of our email, it says, kindness matters. Powerful comment, isn't it? Sometimes we all forget that. Kindness will open many doors for you. And if students understand that, they're going to be much better off. So we want to stress, among other things, this idea of human dignity, mutual respect. And very often people we may not have an affinity for, at a later time we learn they have something to teach us. And some of them become very good friends. So the idea of being open makes us a better person. It makes us grow. And we learn things from other people that we thought we knew, but they knew better than we did. The idea of joy to be. Life should be joyful. There's challenges, there's hard days. There's days where you'll go home, you'll be frustrated, but try to be joyful. And that joy carries us through life. Harmonious relationships. You know, if we watch the news, there's no harmony, right? It's 100% disharmony. In the world we live in, and if you think about the families you know, the people you know, you can go into any community in the U.S. today and you see harmony, you see good families, you see really the American spirit. So essentially what we're trying to do is help students form and develop their God-given talents. And we've already seen from the Luddy schools, some of those talents are pretty darn amazing. They're planted deep inside. The teacher slowly begins to unlock those talents. Sometimes it's very challenging. And sometimes our most challenging students in the end turn out to be some of our best students, right? So what you're doing is so important. It may not be appreciated in our big society, but I think in the overall, the real American society, not the Fox News, not the CNN News Society, it is very much appreciated. And it's expressed in those mothers and fathers that continuously give us that very positive feedback. And if you think about it, Thales is basically an anomaly within the educational system today. It's very high quality. Teachers are very loving to those students. We don't have the chaos and the popular culture. We don't have the lack of discipline and the lack of respect and people being yelled at, screamed at, hit, any kind of thing going on. It doesn't exist at Thales. And it's attracting more and more parents. We have calls from all over the country. People want Thales students. I would mention that there was a family in York, Pennsylvania that contacted me and said, can we have a Thales in York, Pennsylvania? And I said, well, probably right, not in this time frame. They moved to Rolesville. The daughter's going to start Rolesville next Monday. Pretty incredible story, and it's not the first time that's happened. So the impact you have, and I want to continuously try to talk about that impact, is absolutely enormous. I cannot exaggerate the impact. And in the future, we'll try to do a better job of communicating that impact to you. Because when you're working hard, you want to see the fruits of your good labor. Virtue is virtually not talked about in our society today. Talk about everything but virtue. And virtue is really probably one of the most important things in our life, because you can be brilliant. You can have a great education. You can get your credentials stamped. But if you're not a good person, Bishop Sheen many years ago in a speech said, if you're not a virtuous person, it would be far better that you're not educated, because you're going to cause a lot of trouble with your education. We know of people like this. We see them in the political structure. We see them in business and industry. We see them in all walks of life. So what is virtue? It's a quality of mind. It's acquired through repetition. In a sense, we're all slow learners. People think, oh, I'm really smart. I can learn this in real time. But it's a little more complicated than that. And as teachers, you know that better than probably anybody on the planet. We're all slow learners, particularly for very important concepts that take a lot of thought to really appreciate them. It enhances our ability to be the person that we should be, that we are intended to be. And if you ever make this observation, if you have a very virtuous person and you have a very chaotic, rough person, they almost immediately respect that virtuous person because they recognize virtue. Even if they don't practice it and their brain's not into it, they recognize it. So if we want to be happy, we have to be virtuous, and we have to serve. And for you teachers, your life is about service. So you may be frustrated, you may be tired, but you should be very happy with the contribution you're making to the world. And the sacrifices you're making are enormous, but the results are worth it. Prudence, justice, courage, and temperance. These are very, very powerful virtues. There's talk about social justice. Why not just talk about justice? There's many philosophers over the years that have defined justice. And in our hearts, every one of us knows what justice is. Little children know something that's not fair. They'll be happy to tell you about that. They can be a little off on their judgment. They're young. But in our heart, we all understand justice. Temperance is a challenge for every one of us. Okay, we're human. We make mistakes. So it's something we have to work on every day. And for children, it's more difficult. If you think of courage, most people lack the courage of their convictions. You think that's a fair statement? So they know what to do. There's an article, Desmond, who recently wrote about that and said that 60% of the people just kind of go with the flow because they're afraid to say anything. And then according to modern society, they're petrified to say anything, particularly in businesses and public statements. At Thales, we want to be courageous and not be afraid to state our values in school and out of school. And that's going to have an impact on these students. I receive letters from students all the time and emails. I had a student come up to me last week, who was rather a shy kid, I thought, came up to me and said, he introduced himself, said, wow. And he said, I'm so happy I'm at Thales. I feel privileged to be at Thales. I'm excited about being a sophomore at Rolesville. I thought, it just takes your breath away. So you may not always get an opportunity to hear those words, but they're out there. Prudence, self-discipline. We're all challenged for our entire life. And it's been said that the hardest person to manage in the world is ourselves. Because we can't manage anybody else if we can't manage ourselves. And that challenge never goes away. I just turned 78. I have the same problem. Every day we have to figure out how to manage ourselves. We have emotions. Sometimes we do dumb things. So it's continuous. Trying to make the right decisions. My mentor, Dr. Bill Peterson, often stated to me, none of us get it all right. So very often driving to work in the morning, I think you better be careful at the decisions you make because we're prone to error. Ken Iverson, who is a one-day mentor, and I encourage students to do this. You might only get one day with a person. You better learn as much as you can that day. And this is what Ken Iverson said. Of the most experienced individuals, a third of their decisions could be better. He didn't say they were wrong per se. So you can test yourself on this and saying, could have I made that decision a little bit sharper, a little finer? Could have I had just a little better outcome? It happens to me every day. So learning to manage ourselves, control our emotions, deal with difficult situations. I finally reached a point in life where I decided that I didn't realize how it doesn't really matter how hard the task is, because I'm thinking in the back of my mind that Bejan's already told me, if you bring more energy, you'll be able to work through it. And if you can get to that point, then you don't feel overwhelmed by tasks. Go ahead and give me the hard things. There's a book I often mention, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And the author essentially says, we do the hard things. As teachers, you do the hard things. You do them every day. And I see a lot of smiles. You do them with a smile, which is, that's the top. That's the highest quality that you can possibly have. And children can be very challenging. We all know that. Justice, again, we know in our heart what justice is. We know what's fair and what's not fair. And a lot of life, as John Kennedy said, is not fair. But we learn how to deal with it. One of the best ways to ever think about it is that the event plus the response equals the outcome. It's in a book, I think, called Chicken Soup. How we react can control the outcome. So we should always work as hard as we can to focus on that good outcome and that correct response, regardless of the event and the chaos and the challenges that are before us. And very often, I found this with customers, that if they call you and they're upset about something, they can get a little bit emotional. You've probably encountered this with parents from time to time. And usually what I say to them is, well, how can we solve this problem? What would you recommend that we do? And in most cases, the problem is now resolved. And the prescription they provide is very reasonable. Because by pushing that burden back on them, they think, well, I can't be unreasonable. So there are ways to cope and to seek justice without a big consternation about a big fight and a lot of chaos. If we treat people well and fairly and friendly and try to bring that joy to life, we mostly get good outcomes. There's an occasional exception. And if you look at all the families, I mean, you have, 12,000 parents that affirmed that they want their children, they're going to trust their children with you every single day. Conflicts are actually minimal, and they decline every year because people know the way Thales functions, and you do a great job of executing. It takes a lot of skill to be a teacher and deal with parents and deal with students. But Bill Peterson often stated the education is a triangle. It's the teacher, the student, and the parent, and they all have to work together. Some days that's challenging, maybe most days. Again, to reemphasize courage, most people lack courage. And what I found in my own life when I was very young, I think I lacked courage. And what I realized was that it has to be developed. Try small things, keep developing it, and eventually you can move to a much higher level. My father was very courageous, also my mother, but it doesn't necessarily run off. We have to all develop our own skills. Just because we're around skillful people, they're around skillful teachers, but there's no osmosis here. So encourage students to be courageous in a proper way. We can be courageous and completely wrong. That's not the outcome that we're looking for. So courage is very important. It's the missing element, and it's the element that leaders must have to stand up and be courageous. And in the modern world, where people are fearful of stating the truth or stating their opinion, we have to be more courageous than normal. And I think for the most part, if you are courageous, it'll work. There can be some fits and starts. Temperance, moderation, again, we all struggle with it. If we want to have a good life, we have to learn to be temperate. We basically have to train ourselves and retrain ourselves and rethink of what we're doing. Because again, we're emotional, we're human, we're prone to failure unless we're using our brain to control the body and mind in a proper way. So virtue's under attack in our society. It seems like that I talked to a student last week at the debates up in Vermont, and the student went to Yale University. And he almost mirrored this book I was reading where he said that about 2/3 of the students just go along, get along. And about maybe 10+% of the students are courageous, virtuous leaders. And then there's the barbarians, and they're only a small number, but they control the university because they make the most noise. They're the most difficult people. And I will say for Thales as a team, we've learned how to deal with those people. And they don't run Thales, and they're never going to run Thales. So just as you are protecting students, we will do everything we can to protect you as a teacher and a leader. And in the modern world, that has to be done. And if you look at year by year, particularly the last 3 years, the incidence of major problems continues to wane. I'm hoping this year, Matt, that we don't have any problems, but I may be a dreamer. So virtue's under attack. The radicals make the most noise, and they get the most attention in the media. Amity Shlaes is a friend of mine. She leads the Coolidge Foundation, and she's a great author. She's a New York Times bestseller. And one of the things she said, which struck me, and it ties back to classic curriculum, that journalists shouldn't go to journalism school. They should go to the school of philosophy, economics, mathematics, classic curriculum. And one of the problems with a lot of journalists is they don't know a lot. So they just listen to the people that make the most noise and they report on it. So the classic curriculum is going to allow students to be much more discerning, better thinkers. In recent years, I've been telling people the success of Captive Air and the success of Thales is based on virtue, thinking skills, and the relentless pursuit of truth. It's that simple. It's not the buildings. It's not the curriculum. They're all necessary. They're imperative. But if we don't have virtuous people, and we're not constantly thinking and improving, and we're not truth-seeking, and none of us have a lock on truth. Things that you thought you knew, somewhere down the line, you disabused of the idea. Somebody taught you wrong. You read it wrong. So this idea of relentless truth-seeking is imperative. If you look at society, if you look at all the progressive movement, they inverted truth. Kind of come back to the income tax. So last Saturday afternoon, it's almost 90 degrees. My air conditioning doesn't work. A repairman comes out. So he's working in 90-degree heat on Saturday afternoon. And the income tax man is going to make sure that he gets his fair share of that money Saturday afternoon. So think about these things morally. People who work hard shouldn't have to give their money to the government to frivolously spend it or to cause harm with it. What's the basic little medicine? Do no harm. So we want Thales students to think about these concepts that they may be well embedded in our society. Income tax has been around for 110 years now. Think of the human person that basically is under attack. And we all know the end results of the collective. We know the countries. They're unmanageable. Their life is miserable. They have no free speech. They have no resources. And yet in our country, we have the American system, which is capitalism, virtue, and hard work, is under attack. It's produced more abundance and brought more people out of poverty than any system in the history of the world. I call it the American system. Of all the good things that make America what it is, free speech is the beginning, is under attack. Hard work's under attack. Traditional values are under attack. All those are being germinated at Thales Academy. And think about this longer term. We all know what a green shoot is. Thales is a gigantic green shoot. It's known around the country. This week upcoming, the General Assembly is hopefully getting into the final throes of passing a budget. And in that budget will be universal school choice in North Carolina. Think about this. If you went back to 1998, 97, the first charter schools, there was no school choice. There was something about 8% of the students in North Carolina were in private schools. Most of them are very expensive. Most of them not accessible to most people. And in that period of time, because of many courageous leaders, and Thales being a big part of it, when General Assembly members saw, hey, how many General Assembly members have been to Thales? Many, many. And it's had a profound impression on them, and they've told other members. So Thales is a big part of the school change, not only in North Carolina. Ohio passed universal school choice last week, and it was signed by Governor DeWine. So we're seeing many positive changes, and Thales is a catalyst for those changes. So think big picture. Small picture is, and the most important part is, we're educating those students in front of you every day. We have to do that to the highest degree excellent as possible, but you're also creating opportunities around America, maybe eventually around the world, for every student to have a good education. We all know, where would we be if our parents hadn't provided a opportunity for a decent education? I can speak for myself, I would be nowhere. So all those people who sacrificed for our lives and made a difference, we want to do the same thing for everybody else. And regardless of the chaotic society, there will be calm in the future. Winston, do you have any idea how many years that will be? A few years in the future, there will be calm again. The good values will come back. The good people will prevail. The old saying was that the truth prevails in the long term. Sometimes we get frustrated waiting for the long term, don't we? But it actually is prevailing in the majority of America. You can go anywhere in America. I've been to all these towns and places. I've met people all over the country. They're decent, good people. They care about their families. They care about their communities. De Tocqueville wrote about this, in the early 19th century. Michael Novak wrote about it. Maybe Dr. Herring will do a report on that. That if you looked at the same thing that de Tocqueville saw, Michael Novak saw a century later. Americans are good people. They will help you. They will be friendly to you. So I want to leave you with the message that America is a good place. It's the best place in the history of the world. American exceptionalism is based on freedom. Okay, it's that simple. People can come here from any country in the world, from any type of background, and become very successful. And it's because it's a free country. It's a country where we encourage excellence. So it's a great time to live in America. It's a great time to be virtuous. I want to thank you for the overwhelming and tremendous contribution you're making to the world, to our students, to our communities. Here at Flowers Plantation, This is the fastest second building in the history of Thales. So just in a very short period of time, we're reaching capacity. I gave a talk at Chatham Park a few months back, and the developer said, we're just so excited to have Thales right in the center of Chatham Park, this massive development in a rural county. And here's what he said: I'm thinking we need a second Thales campus right here in Chatham Park development. This is unthinkable 5 years ago, 10 years, completely unthinkable that a private school would be in the center of the largest development probably in the history of North Carolina. This is a sea change. So sometimes we miss the obvious, or we don't know about the obvious. The impact you're having is so enormous. Again, I can't exaggerate it. I can tell you about it. I can reiterate it. I can give you examples of it. And soon we will have the Thales Way, thanks to Winston Brady, who spent part of his time off to push this book through. It's in the print mill now. Within 2 weeks, each one of you will have a copy. We welcome your constructive criticism, your comments, because this is going to be a dynamic book. It will be electronically available on our website. You will have copies. It'll be available for publication. So basically what we're saying, this is what Thales does. We don't criticize other people. We know there's other ways of doing things, but this is what we do, and it's dynamic. The last part of the book is a little bit aspirational. We lost our way on vocational education. It's now coming back at Thales. Thanks to Matt, pushed hard to get this done. Vocational education is very important. I could cite chapter and verse in my own life. Without vocational education, I could never have achieved the success I had. It's important to keep us well-grounded, connected to reality. Art and beauty is an integral part of Thales. Music has been for a long period of time. But this idea of inspirational thinking and entrepreneurship, we had a meeting at Thales College last week. And really all entrepreneurship is, it's a subset of skills which can move anywhere. They can, they're important in teaching. They're important in every aspect of life. And then it's just thinking. Okay, the ability to think through, truth seek, and find the best answers. If we can get all of our students to want to be truth seekers, to want to be courageous leaders, to be kind and generous and respectful, the whole world around us is going to change. And you're doing it. And I thank you for doing it. Have a good day.